Let's catch up with our panel now. Sky News contributor Kosha Garda and Radio 2CC Canberra breakfast host Stephen Cenatiempo. Good to speak to both of you. Got to talk about cost of living. Stephen, I'm fascinated what you're getting over the airwaves in Canberra. I know it's the city in the country that's most insulated from cost of living crunches, but is it starting to bite even there?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know that it is insulated, Chris, because this is the most expensive city in Australia to live. Our rents are the highest. Our property prices are going through the roof. And we've got a local government here that exacerbates all the problems that the federal government causes. It is really biting, and it is the single biggest issue that people talk about in Canberra at the moment. Well, apart from the fact that we don't have a health system here, but cost of living is biting, even in the nation's capital. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, Kosha, of course, coming to us from Melbourne, there's always a footy angle. As you know, in Melbourne, whatever the issue is, there's a footy angle. And the story today in the Herald Sun is about how beer prices at the footy are going to top $10 this year. And it's just a good little example of how everything is going up in cost and how people are being hit in the hip pocket everywhere they go.
For sure, it's hitting in all directions for a myriad of reasons, as you cover night after night, Chris. Inflation, supply chain pressures, energy cost inputs, and on the list goes. In the world of pro sports, though, the sales of food and drink at the concession stands in the stadiums ranks way down after media rights and sponsorships and club memberships and ticket sales, etc. So they can afford to absorb some of those costs and take the PR win along the way, which they're doing. But notably, not for beer. That's probably the product that has the least price sensitivity. People will always want that beer at the game, and so they're passing that on to the consumer, and people are going to feel it.
I got to tell you, I reckon I've been paying $10 for a beer at the SCG, so Melbourne maybe is just catching up. It is pricey. Let's have a listen to Jim Chalmers. He was talking in Canberra today after the interest rates went up for the 10th consecutive time.
The cumulative impact of those rate rises for every $500,000 owed is now about $1,000 a month. That's the cumulative impact of these rate rises which began before the election.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close to doubling your mortgage repayments for some people, Stephen. This is the point. It's people with mortgages who are going to feel this the most. This is why interest rates are such a blunt instrument, because there are people who've paid off their homes or are renting, don't get hit as much. But, man, this is really going to hit like a Mack truck pretty soon, isn't it, in the mortgage belts around all our major cities?
It really is, and I guess the irony is that it's the battlers that both parties pretend to represent that are going to be hit the hardest by this. But I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of Philip Lowe and the Reserve Bank, but the Reserve Bank only has the one lever at their disposal. The government doesn't seem to want to pull any levers it has at its disposal, and it's just this is spiralling out of control, and I don't see where it's going to end. I mean, I heard this morning they're expecting at least another 3 or 4 rate rises before we see any sort of relief. This is just extraordinary, and I know I don't want to. People say you're alarmist if you say it's going back to the bad old days of the 70s and 80s, but it could certainly get there if it keeps going this way.
Well, Labor, worryingly, their only prescription, Kosha, seems to be to spend more. They're talking about spending more with cost of living measures. I mean, surely what they need to do is pull as much money out of the economy as they can, curtail their spending.
Those Keynesians, they never learn. It's spend your way to prosperity, and that's a lever they're going to pull. I think the other side, though, as has been mentioned, isn't that much better. It's almost like both parties, in frankly all Western democracies, you can see parallels, are driving towards a cliff, and maybe the left is driving 100 miles an hour and the right's driving 80 miles an hour, but they really are, and spending has been ratcheting up for 30, 40 years straight. That's at the root cause of this. And there are just so many downstream social, societal effects as well when cost of living with housing in particular gets out of reach. It delays family formation, it delays stability and harmony in society. So this is a perfect storm that's coming, unfortunately.
Absolutely. It was the coalition government too. It was rampant spending of free money during the pandemic, but it's not as if people weren't warning them at the time that this will create inflation down the track. They didn't listen, and we're now all wearing it, but only Labor can fix it. Now they're in government, they've got to do something about it. It's a hell of a worry, I think.